The morning of April 11th, 1970, dawned bright and clear at Cape Canaveral, a seemingly ordinary day that would go down in history for reasons far more sinister than anyone could have anticipated. Apollo 13, the third crewed mission intended to land on the moon, was poised for its launch, and excitement buzzed in the air. Thousands of spectators gathered, craning their necks for a glimpse of the mighty Saturn V rocket, which towered over the launch pad like a sentinel of humanity's ambition. Little did they know that this mission would unveil secrets that were never meant to be revealed. As the countdown began, NASA officials, engineers, and astronauts were all focused on the task at hand. The crew, James Lovell, Fred Hayes, and Jack Swigert, were veterans of space travel, but on that day their faces were etched with a strange tension, a premonition of the dread that awaited them. Lovell, the mission commander, had an uneasy feeling in the pit of his stomach, as if something beyond the technical challenges lay ahead. The Saturn V rocket roared to life, igniting a blaze of flames that billowed into the clear blue sky as the massive vehicle ascended into the heavens. The crowds cheered, but Lovell felt a shiver run down his spine, a cold sweat forming on his brow. He forced himself to shake off the feeling. After all, this was a historic mission. He would have to trust the calculations and the meticulous planning that had gone into preparing for this flight. Once in orbit, the mission unfolded smoothly. The crew conducted checks and system diagnostics, communicating with Mission Control in Houston as they made their way towards the moon. However, Lovell noticed a subtle discrepancy in the readings on his instruments, a fluctuation that didn't match the meticulously curated data they had trained with. He mentioned it to Swigert and Hayes, but they brushed it off as an artifact of the transition to space, a minor blip that would resolve itself. But the deeper Lovell delved into the readings, the more disconcerting they became. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. In the back of his mind, he recalled the whispers he'd overheard during training, a vague mention of an incident during the earlier Apollo missions that had been quickly silenced. He hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now it felt like a ghost lurking in the shadows of his mind. 3 days into the mission, the crew was prepping for their lunar insertion burn when disaster struck. An ominous warning light flashed on the control panel, accompanied by a shrill alarm that pierced the silence of the cramped module. Lovell's heart raced as he quickly assessed the situation. "What the hell was that?" he shouted, gripping the controls as panic threatened to seep into the very fabric of their mission. "Swigert, what's going on?" Hayes asked, his voice a mix of confusion and fear. Swigert, the command module pilot, ran through the checklist, his hands shaking slightly. "It's an oxygen tank," he responded, his voice steady despite the turmoil brewing in the cockpit. "It's exploded." A deafening silence filled the cabin as the reality of the situation sank in. The crew was hurtling through space, their lifeline to Earth severed, and they had to act quickly to regain control. With a critical oxygen tank blown, they were facing a possible catastrophic failure of the life support systems. Lovell's training kicked in as he began to issue commands, but deep down, he knew they were fighting against time. Back on Earth, the situation at Mission Control escalated. Engineers scrambled to assess the damage, their faces pale as they realized the full extent of the crisis. The carefully constructed plans began to unravel, and the buzz of excitement turned into a frantic energy as they worked to bring the astronauts home. Yet, amid the chaos, whispers began to circulate, rumors of a cover-up that loomed larger than the mission itself. As the hours ticked away, the Apollo 13 crew fought to maintain their composure in the face of looming disaster. The lifeboat of their command module was slowly leaking oxygen, a precious resource they could ill afford to lose. The harsh reality hit them. The moon landing was no longer the primary objective. Their mission had transformed into a desperate race for survival, a struggle against the void of space that threatened to consume them. Lovell, a seasoned astronaut, turned to Swigert and Hayes, his voice a mixture of urgency and calm. "We need to conserve as much power as possible. That means we have to shut down non-essential systems and find a way to use the lunar module as our lifeboat." He remembered the training exercises, the drills that had prepared them for emergencies. But this was different. This was real, and the stakes were unimaginably high. As they powered down systems, the cabin grew eerily quiet. The only sound the hum of the life support unit struggling to maintain the atmosphere. Lovell felt a knot of dread tighten in his chest. He had always believed that NASA had a handle on every scenario, that they had planned for the unthinkable. But now, faced with the cold reality of space, that belief wavered. In the lunar module, the situation was grim. The power levels were dwindling and the cabin temperature was plummeting. Hayes, who had been monitoring their dwindling supplies, glanced at Lovell with wide eyes. "We're going to run out of food soon," he said, his voice low, "and water is a precious commodity." "Keep an eye on the water and ration what we have left," Lovell ordered. "We need to stay sharp." He forced himself to remain calm, but inside a storm of worry brewed. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that something was lurking just beyond the confines of their spacecraft. As they entered the dark side of the moon, an eerie stillness enveloped them. Outside, the vast expanse of space stretched infinitely, punctuated only by distant stars, yet it felt like a suffocating void. Lovell peered through the window, half expecting to see something watching them, something that had been waiting in the shadows. The crew had to execute a crucial maneuver to slingshot around the moon and begin their journey home. They relied on the lunar module's engine, which had never been intended for such prolonged use. Lovell felt a tremor of doubt. This wasn't just a simple procedure, it was a gamble with their lives. As they prepared for the burn, Lovell's eyes flickered over the control panel, his instincts screaming that something wasn't right. Meanwhile, back at Mission Control, tensions were boiling over. NASA officials were grappling with the enormity of the situation. There was a palpable fear among the engineers that the agency might not be able to bring the crew back safely. Whispers of a cover-up grew louder. Some speculated that the real reason for the disaster lay buried deep in classified documents. A small group of engineers huddled together, voices low. "Did you hear about the something terrible?" one of them asked, his face pale. There were rumors about the previous missions, things they found on the lunar surface. What if they were investigating something they didn't want us to know about? "Those are just conspiracy theories," another engineer replied, but there was uncertainty in his voice. "Still, it feels like there's more to this than they're letting on." Back in the spacecraft, as the crew prepared for the slingshot maneuver, Lovell's instincts proved correct. Just as they engaged the engine, the cabin lights flickered, plunging them into darkness. Alarms blared, warning of another imminent failure. The gravity of their situation hit Lovell like a punch to the gut. "What the hell is happening?" he shouted, panic threatening to seep into his voice. "Engines are malfunctioning. We're losing thrust," Swigert replied, frantically flipping switches to restore power. The cold grip of fear tightened around Lovell's heart as he stared into the abyss of space beyond the thin walls of the lunar module. He felt a primal instinct to survive kick in. Something deep within him knew that they were not alone. Whatever lurked in the darkness of space had awakened, and it was far more terrifying than any mechanical failure. As the crew struggled to regain control of the spacecraft, Lovell's thoughts raced, grappling with the realization that their plight might be the result of something far more sinister than a simple technical failure. The whispers he had overheard during training resurfaced in his mind. Rumors about Apollo missions investigating something otherworldly, something that had been deliberately concealed from the public. With the engine sputtering and alarms ringing in their ears, Lovell called for calm. "We need to work together. and figure out what's happening. If we lose communication with mission control, we're done for." His voice cut through the chaos, bringing a momentary stillness to the crew. Hayes' brow furrowed as he checked the telemetry. The systems are fluctuating wildly. It's like there's something interfering with our power supply. His voice trembled slightly, a mix of fear and determination. Suddenly, the command module's power surged back to life. The lights flickered back on, casting eerie shadows on the walls of the cramped cabin. "I've got it," Swigert exclaimed, though his voice was laced with uncertainty. "I'm rerouting power from the backup systems." Lovell glanced out the small window, his heart racing, as he saw the stark, desolate surface of the moon approaching them. "We're almost at the burn point. Let's hope it holds." But even as he spoke, the pit in his stomach deepened, a growing sense that they were being pulled into a trap, one laid long before they had set foot on the moon. As they executed the burn, the ship trembled violently, the G-forces pushing them into their seats. Lovell gritted his teeth, feeling the strain of the maneuver. The burn completed, they quickly began to track their trajectory. The moon loomed larger, its grey surface a haunting reminder of what lay ahead. But now, the moon had taken on a darker significance. Something was watching from its surface. Suddenly, the radio crackled to life with Mission Control's voice, but it was distorted, garbled, as if something was interfering with their communication. "Apollo 13, this is Houston. Do you read? We're getting unusual readings. Must proceed with caution." The static swallowed the rest of the message, leaving Lovell with a cold chill racing down his spine. "Unusual readings?" Lovell echoed, a growing sense of dread washing over him. "What do they know that they're not telling us?" He glanced at Hayes and Swigert, their faces pale and strained. As they continued their trajectory around the moon, the situation worsened. The cabin grew colder and the lights flickered ominously. "We've lost cabin pressure," Hayes shouted, scrambling to check the instruments. "Get the backup systems online," Lovell ordered, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He could feel the walls closing in on them, the isolation of space becoming suffocating. They were running out of options, and the void beyond felt more threatening with every passing moment. Meanwhile, back at Mission Control, a team of engineers huddled over monitors, their faces drawn tight with fear. "We need to investigate the telemetry," one of them insisted. "There's something off about the lunar readings. We might be dealing with something beyond our understanding." Their concerns fell on deaf ears as the mission director barked orders focused solely on bringing the crew home. "We can't divert resources to investigate ghost stories. We need to focus on the astronauts," he snapped. But as the crew of Apollo 13 continued their journey, Lovell couldn't shake the feeling that the truth was slipping further away from him. Whatever had happened in the past, whatever secrets the moon held, he sensed that they were now part of a much larger narrative, one that spanned beyond their understanding into realms where humanity was never meant to tread. As they approached the far side of the moon, they prepared to execute the critical burn that would send them back home. Lovell took a deep breath, steeling himself against the darkness. But as they crossed the lunar horizon, something unimaginable unfolded before them. From the cockpit window, Lovell caught a glimpse of something, an anomaly, a structure that wasn't supposed to be there. It appeared like a monolith, rising against the desolate landscape, its surface glimmering under the light of distant stars. His heart raced as a chill swept through him. "What is that?" he gasped, his voice barely a whisper. Hayes leaned closer, squinting into the vast emptiness. "It looks unnatural," he stammered. "Should we report this to Houston?" But Lovell felt a creeping sensation of dread settle over him. "No, let's keep this to ourselves for now. We need to focus on getting back." As they steered their craft away from the anomaly, Lovell couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching them, that whatever had been hidden in the depths of the moon's surface had awakened, and they were now inextricably tied to it. The stark landscape of the moon fell away behind them as the crew of Apollo 13 began their return journey to Earth, but the image of the mysterious structure lingered in Lovell's mind like a haunting spectre. He could hardly focus on the controls, his thoughts consumed by the implications of what they had witnessed. What lay hidden on the lunar surface? Why had no one mentioned it during their training? And what was the cost of the truth? As the spacecraft drifted into the silence of space, the tension in the cabin mounted. Swigert and Hayes exchanged nervous glances, the weight of their shared secret heavy between them. They were trapped in a web of fear, caught between survival and the unknown. The sound of alarms echoed through the cabin, a cruel reminder of their fragile existence. Lovell knew they needed to confront the truth, not just for their own sanity, but for the sake of humanity itself. "Guys," Lovell began, his voice steady but low, "I know we all saw something back there, something that shouldn't exist." He paused, gauging their reactions. What if the mission was never about landing on the moon at all? What if it was a cover for something far more sinister? Hayes shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting toward the control panel. "You think NASA knew about that structure, about whatever is out there?" "I don't know," Lovell replied, the gravity of his words sinking in. "But it's clear that they've kept secrets that could change everything we thought we knew about space exploration." Swigert, who had been quiet, suddenly interjected. "What if that's why they're so focused on bringing us home? What if they're worried about what we found?" The implications hung heavy in the air, their significance almost unbearable. Just then, Mission Control crackled back to life. "Apollo 13, this is Houston. Please respond. We need to confirm your status and trajectory." The voice felt distant and disjointed, as if they were speaking from another world. Lovell reluctantly reached for the transmitter. "Houston, this is Apollo 13. We're on our way home, but we need to discuss some anomalies we encountered." "Anomalies?" Mission Control replied, their voice a mixture of confusion and concern. "Please clarify. We have strict protocols." But Lovell cut them off. "There's a structure on the far side of the moon. It looks unnatural. We need to know if you're aware of it." Silence filled the cabin as the transmission fell dead. For a moment, Lovell could hear his heart pounding in his ears, the weight of the truth hanging heavy in the air. Finally, a voice broke through the static. "Apollo 13, we advise you to refrain from discussing sensitive information. Return to your current trajectory, and we'll assist you with re-entry procedures." Lovell felt a cold chill run down his spine. "Sensitive information? What are you not telling us?" Another silence followed, but this time it felt deliberate, as if they were weighing their words carefully. "Apollo 13, your priority is to return safely. We will address your concerns upon your return. Focus on your systems." The line went dead, leaving Lovell with a sense of foreboding. Whatever had been said in that brief exchange resonated within him. They were part of a larger cover-up, an operation that stretched far beyond their mission parameters. What they had encountered was not merely an anomaly. It was a hidden truth, one that someone wanted to keep buried. As they adjusted their trajectory and began the descent toward Earth, Lovell could feel the tension mounting among the crew. Swigert was jittery, fidgeting with the instruments, while Hayes' face was pale, a sheen of sweat coating his brow. The fear of the unknown had taken root in their minds, and it wouldn't be easily shaken off. They had no idea what awaited them upon their return, or what would happen if they revealed what they had seen. Lovell took a deep breath. steeling himself against the tempest of emotions swirling within him. "We'll figure this out together," he said, attempting to instill a sense of calm. "We've made it this far. We can make it home." But as they drew closer to Earth, the gravity of their situation pressed heavily on Lovell's mind. He had faced the vastness of space, the chilling silence of the void, but nothing prepared him for what they had witnessed. They were threading the needle between two worlds, the known and the unknown, and the tension between them felt like a taut wire ready to snap. As the fiery atmosphere enveloped the command module during re-entry, Lovell felt a sense of exhilaration mixed with dread. The heat shield glowed bright red, illuminating their faces in the dark cabin. Outside, the Earth grew larger, a beautiful blue marble against the backdrop of stars. They were coming home, but at what cost? The parachutes deployed with a violent jolt, and Lovell felt the rush of adrenaline surge through him as they splashed down into the ocean. They had made it. They were alive. But as they awaited recovery teams, Lovell's mind was still consumed by the secrets they had uncovered. What they had seen was only the beginning, a portal into a hidden truth that extended beyond the stars. The moment the capsule hit the water, a wave of relief washed over Lovell, but it was short-lived. They had survived the ordeal, but the shadow of the moon hung heavily over them. As recovery boats approached, he felt a tightness in his chest, as if they were being pulled back into the darkness they had just escaped. The hatch opened and sunlight flooded the cramped cabin. The salty air rushed in as Navy divers boarded to assist the crew. Lovell squinted against the brightness, his heart pounding. He wanted to shout, to warn them of the lurking dangers that waited beyond the stars, but the words caught in his throat. "Commander, how do you feel?" one of the divers asked, a look of awe in his eyes as he took in the historic spacecraft. "Relieved," Lovell replied, his voice hoarse, "but we need to talk." As the crew was assisted from the capsule, they were met with cheers from the recovery team and the surrounding media. News reporters clamoured for sound bites, cameras flashing as if they were heroes returning from a grand adventure. Yet, for Lovell, it felt surreal. They were not heroes. They were survivors of a terrifying ordeal, one that had stripped away their illusions. "Can you tell us about your experience in space?" a reporter shouted, pushing forward, a microphone thrust toward Lovell's face. Lovell forced a smile, but inside he felt the weight of their hidden knowledge. "We encountered some difficulties, but we're just glad to be home." He evaded the question, his heart racing as he scanned the crowd, searching for someone, anyone, who might understand the true depth of their experience. As the crew was escorted to a waiting helicopter, Lovell couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The crowd began to disperse, but a figure in a dark suit remained, his eyes trained on Lovell, a knowing look that sent a chill racing down his spine. "Who is that?" Lovell muttered to Swigert as they boarded the helicopter. "Do you see him?" Swigert nodded, a frown creasing his brow. "He's been here since we splashed down. Something feels off about him." The helicopter lifted off, the roar of the blades drowning out the chaos below. Lovell glanced out at the ocean, watching the waves roll beneath them. The vastness of the water felt different now, like a boundary, separating them from the truth. Back on solid ground, the crew was whisked away for debriefings, medical checks, and endless interviews. Yet, Lovell couldn't shake the sense of foreboding that clung to him like a shroud. They were hailed as heroes, but behind the curtain of celebration lay an undercurrent of secrecy. As they sat in a sterile room at NASA, Lovell's mind raced. They were surrounded by officials and scientists, eager to dissect every detail of their mission. "Tell us about the systems malfunction," an engineer prompted, notebook ready, pen poised to capture their every word. "It was an explosion, plain and simple," Lovell said, his voice steady, But there's more to it. We encountered something unusual on the far side of the moon. A structure that shouldn't exist. The room fell silent, eyes narrowing, and he could feel the weight of their scrutiny. "What kind of structure?" one of the officials asked, skepticism lacing his tone. "I don't know how to explain it," Lovell replied, frustration creeping into his voice. "It was unlike anything we've seen. Something unnatural, almost alive." "Alive?" The official raised an eyebrow, and Lovell felt a rush of indignation. "This isn't a joke, sir. We need to know what we're dealing with." But Lovell knew better than to expect understanding. He had crossed an invisible line, one that separated those who understood the truth from those who were content to live in ignorance. As the debriefing continued, Lovell felt a chill sweep over him. The conversations turned sterile, focused on numbers, technical data, and the future of space missions. But Lovell could see the cracks in the facade. The tension in the room was palpable, an undercurrent of fear that none dared to voice. Suddenly, a knock echoed through the conference room, and the door swung open. The man in the dark suit entered, a predatory look in his eyes. "I need to speak with Commander Lovell," he said, his voice low and commanding. The room fell silent, everyone shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Lovell's heart raced as he recognized the man's aura. Someone with authority, perhaps even a government agent. "What do you want?" Lovell asked, keeping his voice steady. The man stepped closer, fixing Lovell with an intense gaze. "This conversation is not for everyone's ears. I suggest we find somewhere more private." Lovell exchanged a glance with Swigert and Hayes, who both looked equally apprehensive. But he felt an inexplicable pull toward the stranger, an urgency to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. "I'll go with you," Lovell said, rising from his seat. "Excellent," the man replied, a sly smile playing on his lips. "Let's not keep the truth waiting." As they stepped out of the conference room, Lovell could feel the eyes of his crewmates on his back, a mixture of concern and confusion. What had he just walked into? The air felt charged, electric, as they navigated through the sterile corridors of NASA. The man led him down a series of winding hallways, finally stopping in front of a small, unmarked door. He glanced around, ensuring no one was watching, before gesturing for Lovell to enter. Inside, the room was dimly lit, a stark contrast to the bright corridors outside. Papers littered the table, and a map of the moon was pinned to the wall, with strange markings that resembled the structure they had seen. "What is this?" Lovell demanded, a mix of intrigue and fear coursing through him. The man leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper. "You've stumbled onto something far more significant than you realize. The structure you saw, it's part of an investigation into extraterrestrial life, one that has been ongoing since the early Apollo missions." Lovell's breath caught in his throat, disbelief mingling with a sense of vindication. "You mean this was all a cover-up? What have you been hiding?" "NASA has known for decades that something lies dormant on the moon," the man continued, urgency in his tone. "They've kept it secret to avoid mass panic and maintain control over space exploration. But the mission you undertook, Apollo 13, it was more than just a lunar landing. It was a search. A search for what?" Lovell pressed, his heart racing. The man's gaze hardened. "For the truth, for evidence that humanity is not alone, and you've unwittingly become a part of it." As Lovell absorbed the weight of the revelations, he felt the ground shift beneath him. The world he had known, the very fabric of reality, began to unravel. The secrets of the universe were more profound and terrifying than he could have imagined. Lovell leaned closer, curiosity mingled with a primal fear. "What exactly did you find on the moon? What is that structure?" The man's eyes darted around the room, ensuring they were alone before he spoke again. "The structure is not just a building. It's an ancient artifact, possibly a remnant of a long-extinct civilization. NASA discovered it during the Apollo 12 mission, but they've buried the evidence ever since. They feared what revealing its existence could mean for humanity. Lovell's mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of the truth. So, what does this have to do with us? Why were we sent to investigate? And why is that man following us? The man's expression turned grave. Your mission was initially intended as a cover for more extensive exploration. The powers that be realized the potential of the artifact and wanted to ensure it was kept hidden. They also wanted to assess the threat it posed, should anyone stumble upon it. Lovell felt a chill run down his spine. A threat? What do you mean? The structure appears to be dormant, the man explained, his voice tense. But there are indications that it can be reactivated. We believe it may contain technology or knowledge that could be dangerous in the wrong hands. The fear is that if word gets out, there will be panic. Nations will scramble for power over it, leading to chaos. Why didn't we know about this during our training? Lovell asked, frustration building. How could they keep something like this from us? Because they had to, the man replied, a hint of desperation in his voice. It was for your protection, and for the safety of the world. But now things are changing. We don't know if the artifact is truly dormant. Your encounter has awakened something, and we need to be prepared. Lovell's pulse quickened. What do you mean, awakened something? Are you saying it's alive? The man's gaze hardened, and he nodded slowly. We believe it has a form of intelligence. During your mission, it might have sensed your presence. It's an ancient entity, one that humanity isn't ready to comprehend. You must be cautious moving forward. As the weight of his words sank in, Lovell's thoughts spiraled. The structure, the feeling of being watched, it was all connected. But why him? Why this mission? What happens now? Lovell asked, feeling the enormity of the situation pressing down on him. Now, the man replied, you need to decide what to do with this information. We have our protocols, but they don't account for the kind of truth you've stumbled upon. You must tread carefully. Lovell felt a rush of indignation. You can't expect us to just bury this. This is bigger than anything we've ever faced. The man's eyes narrowed. This is not a game, Commander. You must consider the implications. There are forces at play that will stop at nothing to maintain the status quo. You must protect this knowledge. Just then, the door swung open and a group of agents flooded the room, their expressions grim. We need to leave, now, one shouted, urgency in his tone. Lovell's heart raced as they ushered him out, panic gripping his chest. What's happening? He demanded, but the agents remained tight-lipped, their focus solely on getting him to safety. Outside, the atmosphere was charged with tension, the world seemingly holding its breath. The dark-suited man was there, watching with an inscrutable expression. You'll need to stay under the radar for now. They can't know what you found. As Lovell was escorted away, he glanced back, meeting the man's gaze. What's your name? He shouted, desperation spilling into his voice. But the man simply shook his head, a somber look in his eyes. You won't need it. Just remember, the truth is a double-edged sword. Handle it with care. As Lovell was led away, the reality of his situation began to settle in. The thrill of space exploration had given way to a darker narrative, one filled with secrets, hidden agendas, and the weight of humanity's fate resting on his shoulders. He was no longer just a commander. He was now a guardian of a truth that could change everything. Days turned into weeks as Lovell tried to navigate the aftermath of their mission. The debriefings continued, but now they felt like hollow exchanges, devoid of any real substance. He shared the bare minimum with his crewmates, careful not to let slip the deeper truths they had uncovered. But the weight of their secret hung heavily between them. Hayes and Swigert were restless, haunted by the echoes of their experience on the moon. Lovell could see it in their eyes, the desire for answers, the need for closure. They were no longer just astronauts. They were part of a narrative that transcended the confines of their mission. As he sat alone in his office one afternoon, Lovell felt the familiar pull of the unknown. The structure on the moon called to him like a siren, an inexplicable urge to return, to uncover the mysteries that lay buried beneath its surface. No. He was startled from his thoughts when there was a knock at the door. It swung open, revealing Hayes, his face etched with determination. "Jim, we need to talk." Lovell gestured for him to sit. "What's on your mind?" Hayes leaned forward, his voice low. "I can't shake this feeling, Jim. What we saw, it's not just going to go away. We need to do something about it." Swigert entered moments later, a determined look in his eyes. "He's right. We can't just sit here and pretend like nothing happened. We need to investigate. We have to understand what we encountered." Lovell felt a surge of excitement mixed with fear. "You both realize what we're risking, right? The government will do everything to keep this quiet. We're treading on dangerous ground." "I don't care," Hayes replied, his voice firm. "We owe it to ourselves, to everyone. We've seen the truth, and we can't let it fester in the shadows." Lovell took a deep breath, weighing their words. "If we do this, there's no turning back. We have to be prepared for the consequences." As they discussed their plans, Lovell felt a renewed sense of purpose. They would not be mere pawns in a larger game. They would become active players, pursuing the truth with fervor. Together, they would return to the moon to confront the secrets that lay hidden beneath its surface. But as they began to strategize, Lovell couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The shadows seemed to lengthen, the walls closing in, and the spectre of the unknown loomed ever larger. They were stepping into a world where the truth was a dangerous weapon, and they would have to wield it wisely. As they prepared for their next mission, Lovell felt the weight of destiny resting on his shoulders. The journey ahead would be fraught with peril, but the allure of the unknown was irresistible. They were no longer just astronauts. They were explorers of a truth that lay hidden among the stars, one that would redefine humanity's place in the universe. The moon awaited them, and with it, the secrets of the cosmos.